Xbox or PlayStation, DC or Marvel, Star Trek or Star Wars, it's a tale as old as time. Every popular franchise or brand has its share of devoted followers. The same goes for Uncharted and Tomb Raider. The third installment of the rebooted Tomb Raider series is less than a week away. In light of Shadow of the Tomb Raider's imminent release, I decided to dedicate a video to the strengths and weaknesses of the two most beloved treasure hunting franchises. Since Tomb Raider's first major competitor was released in the form of Uncharted Drake's Fortune, fans of both franchises often engage in heated debates, which isn't at all surprising given the stark similarities between the two. I'm sure to outsiders the games could even seem totally identical apart from the protagonists. Naturally, the question that dominates many conversations is which series is the better treasure hunting adventure, Team Nathan or Team Lara? As someone who is a fan of both, I find it very difficult to give a definite answer on an objective, unbiased level. Uncharted had a major impact on my perception of video games. Until I played Uncharted, I mostly viewed games as a fun way to pass some time. However, following Nathan Drake on his adventures was sort of an eye-opening experience. I instantly fell in love with the greatly written characters and mind-blowing presentation. From there on out, I began to value video games as an incredible storytelling medium. In a way, Uncharted kindled my passion for games. Subjectively speaking, I take Uncharted over Tomb Raider any day of the week. However, personal preferences aside, both franchises have their merits. I'd even go as far to say it's almost impossible to pick a clear winner. Don't get me wrong, in some cases you can give a clear and decisive answer. Sometimes, believe it or not, one thing is obviously better than another, plain and simple. To pick an extreme example, whether you are a Lords of the Fallen or Dark Souls fan is irrelevant to the blatantly obvious conclusion that Dark Souls outshines the former in every single aspect. One is a unique and masterfully crafted game with a clear artistic vision, whereas the other is a shameless rip-off offering no new ideas whatsoever, while also struggling and failing to recreate the aspects which make Dark Souls so brilliant in the first place. That being said, the answer isn't as clear-cut when we compare Uncharted and Tomb Raider. While both series share a lot of similarities and definitely cater to the same audience by and large, in my opinion, they are also different enough to justify a peaceful coexistence. To get back to my example, Lords of the Fallen is copying the Dark Souls blueprint, but hardly does anything to improve upon it or add unique concepts of its own. In comparison, Uncharted and Tomb Raider have not just copied from each other, they also managed to create their own identities. When Uncharted tried to make a name for itself, it may have adopted the underlying structure of the genre Tomb Raider had established, but it also made sure to bring along a set of characteristics that were unique to Uncharted. It's a productive history of mutual inspiration rather than a history of unimaginative rip-offs. So, before we jump into the individual differences between Uncharted and Tomb Raider, I think it's important to remind ourselves of the shared history between the two adventure icons. Since the first Tomb Raider was released back in 1996, Lara Croft's globe-trotting adventures helped to define a genre and turned the British archaeologist into one of gaming's most iconic and recognizable heroes. Tomb Raider's mixture of platforming, third-person shooting and puzzle sections established an action-adventure blueprint that was adopted by countless games. The immense popularity and financial success of the early Tomb Raider games even led to big-budget movie adaptations, theme park rides, an animated series and countless comic books. For almost a decade, Lara Croft was the undisputed queen of the action-adventure genre, remaining mostly unchallenged. That is, until the PS3 received one of its first major exclusive games in the form of Uncharted Drake's Fortune in 2007.
My end is near. In my final hour, I commend my soul to God. May He have mercy on this unholy place. Francis Drake.
People immediately pointed out the obvious similarities to Tomb Raider, which led to the somewhat mocking nickname Dude Raider, insinuating a new Tomb Raider game under the disguise of a male protagonist. Just like Tomb Raider, Uncharted Drake's Fortune featured a treasure-obsessed protagonist, exploring hidden temples in a constant change between climbing, puzzle and shooter sections. The game clearly adopted many of the signature elements Tomb Raider had popularized, leading some people to believe it's nothing but a cheap rip-off. Uncharted represented Naughty Dog's first attempt to leave behind the talking animals and cartoony worlds of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter, in exchange for something more grounded and realistic, but equally as colorful and humorous. No one expected the game to be a smashing success. In fact, the development of Drake's Fortune was full of obstacles and hardships that almost killed the studio. Fortunately, the game received positive reviews and sold very well, giving Naughty Dog the chance to improve their newly established franchise in a sequel.
So, they have beaten you, huh? Your quest is over? What if it's only beginning?
2 years later, Uncharted Among Thieves set the video game world on fire. The game was an unprecedented leap in quality and provided a new gold standard for linear-driven action-adventure experiences. Naughty Dog perfected the formula of Drake's Fortune and garnered great praise for the unique cast of characters, phenomenal set pieces, and a pacing and presentation akin to big Hollywood action blockbusters. While Among Thieves sold like hotcakes and became one of the highest rated games of the entire console generation, Lara Croft's success came to a sudden end just 1 year prior. Tomb Raider Underworld's mediocre reviews and unsatisfying sales were the last nail in the coffin. As Tomb Raider's popularity dwindled, Uncharted established itself as the new king of the genre. The Apprentice surpassed the Master. In the coming years, Uncharted went on to dominate the genre Tomb Raider used to own. At the end of the console generation, Naughty Dog was regarded as one of the most talented and respected studios in the industry, Uncharted being the gateway to their success.
A famous explorer once said that the extraordinary is in what we do, not who we are.
In 2013, Square Enix decided to return to the treasure hunting business in a big way. Under the creative lead of Crystal Dynamics, Lara Croft was reintroduced to a modern audience. Because Uncharted was the current action-adventure champion, the Tomb Raider reboot was criticized for being an Uncharted ripoff, the same accusation leveled against Uncharted so many years ago. Which leads us to the present. This console generation witnessed the coexistence of both franchises. Uncharted is slightly more successful in terms of critical acclaim and sales figures, but the market seems to be strong enough to support two treasure hunting series at once. I am a point in case. Despite the short time span between Rise of the Tomb Raider and Uncharted 4, it didn't feel like I was just getting more of the same. Despite equal genre conventions, Uncharted gives me something Tomb Raider doesn't, and the other way around. Once we take a look at the minute-to-minute gameplay in Uncharted and Tomb Raider, a first major difference reveals itself, probably the most significant difference overall: pacing. Both series revolve around the same basic story structure and place you in remote, exotic locations, yet the pacing feels completely different. The Tomb Raider reboots aren't exactly open-world games, but they feature many tasks we would associate with open-world adventures. You are able to explore massive hub areas full of side quests, hidden paths and collectibles. Basically, it's a sequence of miniature open-world maps held together by linear tunnels connecting the individual areas. Apart from side quests and collectibles, the games also put emphasis on light RPG mechanics. You gain experience points to level up your skill tree, gather resources and hunt to craft items and improve your weapon arsenal, and so on and so forth. Tomb Raider's gameplay loop forces you to spend a lot of time in one area and get used to one environment. The first Tomb Raider reboot is confined to one Japanese island. Aside from the opening section in Syria, Rise of the Tomb Raider focuses entirely on the snowy landscape of Siberia, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider places you in a South American jungle setting. This limitation on one primary setting doesn't exist in Uncharted. Just like the first Tomb Raider reboot, Drake's fortune takes place in one single environment. However, since Uncharted 2 it has become a trademark of the series to feature a vast variety of different environments and settings. Of course, each Uncharted game revolves around one prominent setting that's used to shape the identity of each title, but before you get to the primary environment, the game sends you on a wild chase around the entire globe. To give you a direct comparison, Uncharted 2, 3 and 4 featured at least twice the number of locations than the latest 3 Tomb Raider games. We've seen Istanbul, Borneo, Nepal, London, Colombia, France, Syria, Yemen, the Rub al Khali Desert, Italy, Scotland, Madagascar, and several tropical islands in the Indian Ocean. Moreover, crafting mechanics, side quests and skill trees are nowhere to be found. Uncharted is the poster child of linear, story-driven single-player games. The series has to remain free of crafting mechanics and giant hub areas filled with side content in order to maintain the fast-paced action. The entire idea behind the franchise was to create a gaming experience in the vein of a playable summer blockbuster. You jump from location to location and from set piece to set piece on a guided journey, constantly keeping you entertained. You never want to put the controller down. That's exactly what makes Uncharted so attractive. People appreciate the fact that you don't have to spend hours on end in menu screens and check off side content. You simply enjoy the ride. But Uncharted's great variety of locations and fast-paced action comes at a cost. Because the game makes sure to keep up the pace, you don't have much time to explore the world around you. Tomb Raider's wide open areas, survival mechanics and the ability to explore at your own pace add a sense of discovery. You actually feel like an explorer uncovering the mysterious history of the place. Tombs have always been and still are the undisputed highlight of the series. The crafting and survival mechanics play into Lara's character as a resourceful and skilled survivor who has learned to use the environment to her advantage. I'm not saying that Tomb Raider's slower pacing is better or worse compared to Uncharted's action-packed adventure. Both design choices make sense. They are just placing more value on different aspects of the treasure hunting genre. Uncharted's mind-blowing set pieces always were one of the major selling points. Over the years, Naughty Dog perfected the seamless implementation of jaw-dropping set-piece moments. Although the set pieces in Tomb Raider are well executed and belong to the best in the genre, Uncharted's iconic set pieces remain pretty much unchallenged. As impressive as Tomb Raider's action scenes are, you can't shake off the feeling that Uncharted has already done it years before. There's only so much you can do in terms of original set pieces, and by now even Naughty Dog is beginning to combine action sequences from their previous games because they're running out of ideas. What set pieces could Tomb Raider implement that haven't already been explored by Uncharted? We had derailing trains, dozens of collapsing cities and buildings, fights against helicopters, crashing airplanes, capsizing cruisers, several chase scenes on foot and on wheels, a boat chase, and combinations of all these moments. Uncharted has set a high benchmark for action-packed set pieces. In that regard, Tomb Raider is fighting an uphill battle. Tomb Raider's set pieces are great, they are just not as iconic. I think it's fair to say that the train level, the airplane crash, and Uncharted 4's Jeep chase are moments that will be referenced for years to come. This point goes to Uncharted.
I hate this truck! Hang on, Nathan!
Uncharted's characters are the heart and soul of the franchise and the biggest achievement. While most villains tend to be walking and talking cliches and serve no other purpose than being your stereotypical bad guy, the main cast is full of interesting character dynamics. Nathan, Sully and Elena are the holy trinity of Uncharted, and in my opinion, the character writing doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's nowhere near the complexity of something like Last of Us, for instance, but they add an emotional element to the series. Just like Nathan, Sully has been a thief for most of his life and never knew whom he could trust. For that reason he trusted no one but himself, leading to a very lonely lifestyle devoid of meaningful relationships. Nathan was the first person he actually cared for and gave his life a greater purpose.
Nate.
Drake, huh? Okay. I see great things in our future, kid. Great things.
The boy grew dear to his heart and he began to treat him like his own son, trying to save Nathan from a self-destructive treasure hunting obsession. When Nathan is delirious and close to death, it's an apparition of Sully that leads him out of the desert and makes sure he doesn't give up.
Here's the thing, kid. We don't get to choose how we start in this life. Real greatness, it's what you do with the hand you're dealt.
Nate and Elena are made for each other, but Nate's treasure obsession makes a normal relationship virtually impossible, no matter how much he wants to be with her. So their love for adventure unites and separates them at the same time.
I know.
No, I mean, that's...
I know what you mean.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Despite the fact that Sam is Nate's older brother, in terms of life experience he is the one who needs teaching, not Nathan. Sam spent over a decade in prison, so when he finally reunites with his brother, Nathan is reminded of a younger, inexperienced version of himself. Sam was stuck in a time capsule while Nathan learned to control his reckless treasure hunting obsession for the sake of the people he loves. At the end of Uncharted 4, the younger brother educates the older one.
Got sunk.
Oh, boy.
How long we been chasing this thing, huh? You and me. No offense to these guys, but they don't get it.
Actually, Sam, they do. They really do.
Okay.
Trust me, they've seen this kind of obsession before. Sam, we're not those kids anymore. We're not.
You get my point. It's not Shakespeare, but the character development is believable and you definitely become emotionally attached to them over the course of 4 games. Tomb Raider's characters, on the other hand, are a liability rather than an asset. Apart from Lara herself, the entire supporting cast is full of atrociously written characters. Especially the 2013 reboot featured characters so annoying and boring that I genuinely wanted them all to die a horrible death halfway through the game.
That was badass, Laura. How the hell did you get in here?
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
The characters are poorly written stereotypes and destroy the entire atmosphere, diverting our attention from the best parts of the game, Lara's isolated fight for survival. Most of them have no influence on Lara's progression whatsoever. Uncharted is strongest when Nathan is interacting with a cast of characters like Sully and Elena. Much of Nathan's history and personality is defined by the characters around him. In contrast, Tomb Raider is strongest when Lara is on her own, trying to survive in a hostile environment. The story structure is completely identical in Uncharted and Tomb Raider anyway. In order to prevent the bad guy from taking over the world with a magical artifact, follow a clue that leads you to another clue, which will eventually lead you to the desired treasure. The end. Characters make the difference. But since the characters in Tomb Raider tend to be so goddamn awful, I hope the next one features as little Jonah as possible. The tone is another key difference. Uncharted's landscapes are colorful and bright, like covers from Pulp Fiction magazines, whereas Tomb Raider's focus lies on cold and hostile environments. To a certain extent, Uncharted still carries the DNA of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. The series is known for its light-hearted banter, silly one-liners, and ability to make you want to go on vacation. For the Tomb Raider reboot, Crystal Dynamics envisioned a more gritty and serious approach. Overall, Tomb Raider is darker and bloodier. Again, there's no right or wrong here, it's just another aspect that differentiates the two franchises. To call Uncharted a rip-off of Tomb Raider or vice versa, just because they share similar inspirational sources and gameplay mechanics, is short-sighted. Climbing, shooting, puzzle solving and exotic settings are characteristics of the genre. Is Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas nothing more but a rip-off of Godfather just because it's a mafia movie? We don't get far if that's the logic we base our judgment on. As always, we have to make distinctions on an individual basis. Unlike an unoriginal copycat, Tomb Raider and Uncharted always maintained their own identity. At face value, both franchises cater to treasure hunting aficionados, but after a closer look, a couple of key differences make for two very unique experiences. In some cases, Uncharted and Tomb Raider are just different from each other in a way that isn't better or worse, and in other cases, both franchises would do good to take some lessons from the competition. The reality is, if it weren't for Tomb Raider, Uncharted wouldn't be as great as it currently is. And if it weren't for Uncharted, Tomb Raider wouldn't be as great as it currently is. It has been a long and beneficial history of mutual inspiration. As always, thank you guys a lot for watching. Please consider subscribing to my channel and like the video if you haven't done so already. So, what about you? Which franchise do you prefer and for what reasons? Feel free to tell me in the comments section below. See you guys!